Hello my dudes, welcome to my video which pays homage to Tiffany Ferguson's series of internet analysis where she likes to research and discuss things related to social issues and media. When I had this idea to do a video essay for this project, I wanted to pick a topic that I know a lot about, would be very fun to research, and that I'm passionate about. And so I chose the topic of the Fast and the Furious franchise. There are many things that one could talk about the Fast and Furious franchise, like the objectification of women, the blatant misogyny, or just how unrealistic most of the events were. But I decided that I wanted to know how much infrastructural damage is caused by the characters in the movies. Now this idea came to me the first time I watched Fast 5. If you're not familiar, at the climax of the film, Vin Diesel and Paul Walker drive a safe down the streets of Rio, and I couldn't help but think, like, will the city of Rio ever financially recover from this action sequence? And from then on, every time I've seen any of the films, I just can't help but have that thought of, like, if this were to happen, what would actually be the consequences of them? So what is infrastructure? I decided to use the definition on Investopedia.com on hard infrastructure, which they describe as the physical system needed to run a modern industrialized nation. I also grouped in military related things into this group because I feel like that's more fun. So my one mistake was that I thought, I'm not going to count every single car that gets destroyed because that would be ridiculous. I don't need to worry about it. And then, upon researching a totally different problem, I realized the United States government pays for about 9% of all the fees associated with every car crash. So I just looked up how many cars were destroyed in the production of the film and then decided that that was a good enough answer, because there was absolutely no way I was going to go rewatch all of the films again to count how many cars are destroyed in some fashion. Other than that, we just have to take a quick message from our sponsor. Here's a quick overview of the characters and their names, because I will be referring to them throughout the video, and if you haven't seen any of these movies, that will be very confusing. The Fast and the Furious, released in 2001, about 2 months after I was born, so that's cool. Not too much happens in this one infrastructure-wise. The few expenses that are there are mainly because Brian is working as an undercover cop at the time. So when his cars get blown up and he needs to replace them, technically it's a cop car, so it counts. So pretty early in the film, we see Brian having to buy 2 tanks of NOS in order to race against Dom. Didn't ever think I would have to Google the price of that. And then at about the 30 minutes mark, his car fully explodes. His boss at the time says in a later scene that that car was $80,000, so that's that. And then at the very end, him and Dom destroy train crossings, like barriers. So to find the price of car accidents in the States, I found a great report by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration of the U.S. Department of Transportation. Thank you to my roommates who helped with the calculations and such. And from these numbers, I gathered that the government would be paying about $1,000 per car that is destroyed in an accident. And that is the number that I used in the calculations. And so with that, the first movie comes to a total of $162,040. And that's barely anything once we get to the other ones. So moving on to Too Fast, Too Furious, released in 2003. Again, not a lot happens. We've got a parking meter, and then a cop car gets shot a bunch of times, And then in the final chase, I counted about 20 cop cars getting put out of commission, we'll say. And the count for the cars in the filming was 130. So it comes to a total of $764,150. The Fast and the Furious Tokyo Drift, released in 2006. Widely considered the best movie and remarkably cheap, as the only instance that I counted was at 1 hour and 15 minutes, Han's car explodes. And that is it. This was the only one I did go back and rewatch the scenes to count cars, because I was almost certain that there's barely any, and I counted 16. So it gives us the grand total of $16,480. Next up, we have Fast and Furious 2009, not to be mixed up with The Fast and the Furious 2001. There's a big difference. At the very beginning of the movie, we see the squad stealing some fuel from a fuel tank, which then blows up or falls off a cliff. Either way, it's destroyed, and it takes out a highway rail with it. And then like 40 minutes later, they mess up a highway again. So honestly, not that big of a deal for this one. However, we did get 190 cars in the count. So Fast and Furious gives us a total of $278,580. And so that is the last movie that does not make it into the millions of dollars. So knowing that, let's get to Fast 5 from 2011. Now, Fast 5, it just takes it to a way different level. So for this one, I'm not gonna include every median, tree, and lamppost that gets hit, because that would be a really boring video. So instead, I'm just gonna read the things of note. Right off the bat, 1 minute and 45 seconds in, they destroy a prison bus because they're breaking Dom out of a prison bus. And technically, this scene is established at the very end of the fourth film, but it doesn't actually get to the part where the bus is destroyed, so it counts for the fifth one. So then a bit later, they destroy part of a train while trying to steal cars from it. And then, while trying to escape the train, they destroy a bridge. So that wasn't great. And then we have almost 45 minutes before the next event, which was that they completely destroy a plumbing system inside a police office. And I didn't really know how to look up how much that would cost, but I just looked up how much it would take to add new plumbing to a new house and decided that that would be kind of in the same ballpark. The final chase of Fast 5 includes 22 cop cars being destroyed, 2 cop cars being stolen, along with a garbage truck. They destroy 2 walls of the police station, so they have to rebuild that, of course. They also destroy a bridge, and then they steal $100 million. And so finally, Fast 5 has a count of 260 cars being destroyed. I understand that that number probably includes the cop cars that were destroyed, but we're just gonna ignore that. The Fast 5 total is $116,074,180. From there, we move on to Fast and Furious 6. Really seems like they kind of gave up on the whole cool, clever naming thing, but oh well. F6 starts off strong with 4 military vehicles being destroyed, as well as a car being in a building after being launched into one. And then just a bit after that, we see The Rock destroy an interrogation room while interrogating someone, which is like a whole other legal thing, but there's that. And then a while later, there's this massive explosion that destroys this entire space, and for the life of me, I cannot tell what this space is. I looked at it for so long, paused it, rewinded it, had my roommates come in, look at it, couldn't figure it out, so I went with storage facility because it kind of gives off those vibes. But either way, it's totally gone. And then almost an hour later, we have my favorite thing in the entire series, which is the sequence that I like to call Tank on the Highway. Now, as you would assume, the tank really does a good job of destroying lots of stuff. Shoots down 2 bridges completely, destroys a large portion of the highway, and then takes out a few military vehicles as well. It's just amazing. No words. Tank on the highway. Finally, a little bit after that, at the very end of the movie, we have a landing strip and a cargo plane severely damaged. And for the cargo plane, it begins with them shooting harpoons at the plane wings and then dangling cars from them. And you might think, well, that's not the whole plane, but rest assured, it does explode at the end of the sequence, so we're all good. So that brings Fast and Furious 6 to $484,725,560. Respectable. Next up, we have Furious 7, released in 2015. The antagonist in Furious 7 really pulls no punches at all. He comes in strong and he stays strong through the entire film. Right off the bat, 2 minutes 45, an entire hospital down for the count. Just a bit after that, an entire FBI office explodes. And then a few minutes after that, what I can describe as house bomb, which is he sends a bomb to the house and it explodes the house. So he really just came out guns a-blazing, or bombs a-blazing, I guess. So after this, we wait about a whole hour until the team flies to Abu Dhabi to destroy stuff over there. In the Etihad buildings, the whole group successfully destroys a DJ's turntable, an entire suite, which is full of very lavish things. They steal a $3.4 million car and then jump it through 3 buildings and then let it fall out of the last one, destroying it. So I counted that as 3 floors because the whole structural integrity of this building is now very precarious. And then in one of the buildings, they drive through like an art gallery or an art exhibit. And I just wrote in my notes, priceless art, because like there's the terracotta warriors and a whole bunch of other paintings, and I can't really give a value to those. The FBI has a value put on one terracotta warrior, and it's 3.4 million, and there are 13 of them in the scene. So that's the number I'm going with, but realistically, it's way more. At the final scene of the film, they're back in America, and they destroy multiple buildings, multiple bridges. Again, an entire parking garage is just brought to the ground, and 1 lamppost. And so, accounting for all of those, we come to the total of $972,292,857. Just under 1 billion. And moving right along into the fate of the Furious. released in 2017. They're really back on it with the fun names. It is shocking, I will say, and I can't. You'll see. We'll get there. 20 minutes in, so it's a slow start compared to others. An entire military base in Berlin is destroyed. And then following that, about 23 military vehicles also completely destroyed. And then they destroyed an electric fence that's going around the military base. And I didn't really know how to find the cost of fixing an electric fence because it's not really something that most people need to know. I could only ever find things about cattle. I was able to find the cost of an entirely new electric fence, and so that's what we're going with because it's definitely more intense than fences intended for cattle. And then again, there's like a huge jump of time between that and then the next infrastructural events. And that one's really just a lot of minor stuff plus 2 shops. And then finally, the climax of the film. Once again, an entire military base just taken out. And then in this chase, they also damage 17 military vehicles. But the pièce de la résistance is the military submarine that explodes. I was imagining like a couple $100 million makes sense for a military grade submarine. No, $3.4 billion for one of these submarines. If you couldn't tell, the Fate of the Furious is definitely the most expensive. With all of those numbers calculated, the Fate of the Furious gets a total of $6,452,122,190. Even if you take away the $6 billion, it is still more expensive than the first 5 movies. And then it does that and so much more. And then finally, onto F9. It's called F9, but F9 is a lot more fun to say. So, F9. F9, released in 2021, honestly, pretty underwhelming, plot-wise and destruction-wise. Slow start, once again, 17 minutes, a few military vehicles, done. In this movie, they have magic magnets because the function in which they are used doesn't make sense if you know how magnets work, but we're just going to ignore that. And so these magnets often pull cars through buildings. So like an hour in, car goes through a shop. So I counted that. And then they also destroy a couple minor things in that too, but it's hard to outdo car through a block of shops. A little bit after that, just over the 2-hour mark, they take down a bunch of power lines with the magic magnets, which is super cool of them. And again, some road is destroyed, but at this point, no one really cares about that. At the final climax of the film, we have some highway getting destroyed, some road, some railings, a satellite, because they send a car to space. Yeah, there's a car in space and they drive into a satellite on purpose. And they take down an entire apartment building that was in the process of being built. Contrary to the submarine cost, I thought the satellite would be way more expensive, but it is a measly $350 million. Like, come on. With that, we get $435,058,380. And if you take all of that and add it all up, you get a total of $8,465,494,417. If you want to look at how these movies all compare to each other, I originally wanted to do like a bar graph with all of them, but it's actually impossible because the first 4 have such low numbers compared to the last ones that if they're all on the same scale, you can't see the first 4 films at all, because it's hard to represent 6 billion with 16,000 on the same graph. So I had to break it up into the first 4 and then the last 5. It's, as you would expect from these films, they just get progressively more expensive, except for the 9th one. Honestly disappointing. It places so low compared to the others, especially its predecessor. I did make a pie chart, and I think it does a great job of showing you why I could not put them in a bar graph, because you can see here that The Fate of the Furious is 76% of the entire cost of all of the movies together. The first 4, they just don't affect it at all. When you look at which items cost the films the most money, submarine obviously at the top, 40% of the cost just from one submarine, followed closely behind by the 2 military bases at 35%. And if you can see, that's about 3/4 or 75%. And both of these things are in the 8th one. So the math checks out. It really is just that bad. This was a really fun video to research for, and I'm positive that Google has no idea what to serve advertisements about for me, because for the last week, my Google searches have been the most ridiculous things in the world. When you think about how 20 years ago, the first one came out, and it was very much about street racing, and then slowly but surely, they added tanks onto highways, and then destroying military submarines, and then flying a car to space. It's ridiculous when you look at them as a whole in that sequence. And when you consider the fact that after the 7th one, they had wrapped up the main character's plotline really well because of the death of Paul Walker, it begs the question, like, well, why didn't you just stop there? Because pretty much everyone's storylines were wrapped up nicely, and they definitely could have moved on and had it be a satisfying ending. But instead they just keep going and keep making more. It's clear to me that the heart of the series is gone. I mean, most people don't go to see them in theaters anymore, even though a lot of them are like the top grossing films. And I watched them the same reason I watched the Twilight series, because I find it fascinating how many professionals had to greenlight every step of the way of these films and say, yes, good job, keep going. It's a great franchise. I fully recommend it, even though I've just spoiled the entire plot of every film for you. But again, it's still a fun watch, and the acting is honestly decent throughout the entire thing. If you like this kind of video, please go check out Tiffany's channel, because she does them much better than me. And I really enjoy the topics that she discusses and covers. So yeah, go check out her, and thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, and grab a Corona and go sit with your family and watch a whole bunch of dudes drive super fast cars for like 20 hours.